Banjo Ben here in the cabin. Today we're going to talk about changing guitar strings. It can seem like a scary thing if you've never done it before, but it's really not that big a deal. There are thousands of videos out there teaching you how to change guitar strings and people with different methods. And I found that with something like this, it's good to just educate yourself on how people do it maybe a little differently, because a lot of folks will have some tips and tricks that you can take with your own technique and become more efficient as you do it. How often should you change guitar strings? That's also debatable, as well as many of the things that I will do here today. I usually just change mine based off of feel and sound. And so it's going to depend on how much I'm playing. It's going to depend on the atmosphere that I've had my guitar in. And if you let that friend with abnormal, superhuman acid in their fingers play your guitar, it can kill your guitar strings. So you always... I always keep a spare guitar at a jam for that one guy that I know is going to show up, and I give that guitar to him so he doesn't kill my brand new strings that I'm changing on this. So let's talk about changing strings. I'm also going to show you some of the things that I will often use to help in this process. And when you do have your strings off your guitar, it's a great opportunity to clean your guitar if needed, and we'll talk about that as well. So first thing you're going to do, of course, is remove your guitar strings. If you have a capo on it, like this sweet Elliott that I had there, you'd of course remove that, get everything out of the way. And I love using a little neck cradle device like this. We sell these at the general store, or one just like it, and it's very helpful just to keep your guitar from waddling around on whatever surface that you're changing your strings on. And when we talk about removing the strings, because that's what we're going to do first, of course, there's several different schools of thought with that. Some people like to do just one at a time. Some people do two at a time. Most of the guitar shops that I've been around, including at the general store, they'll just remove all the strings at once. And I know that some people, including myself, can be a little nervous doing all strings at once, because we've heard horror stories about guitars not having the proper tension on them and something shifting with the structure of the guitar. That's generally not something that you have to worry about with modern guitar construction, especially if you're not going to leave the strings off of it for a long period of time. So if you're just going to take your strings off and put them back on, my opinion is it's fine to just do them all at once, and that offers you the ability to be able to clean it a little easier than it does if you just do one or two strings at a time. So I'll demonstrate just how I remove a guitar string, and then we'll speed through taking the rest of them off. And then we'll talk about putting them on, of course. Taking them off, you can just do it the old-fashioned way by hand, but there's all kinds of handy-dandy tools out there. These string winders like this D'Addario, string clipper, D'Addario. People make fun of me for saying D'Addario, just a country boy. But they'll have a string clipper, also a string winder on the end here. This is actually a custom string winder that a friend of mine sent me that's really handy too. Any of these will work. And all that you've got to do is just get enough tension off that string to where you can just pop one of those wraps over the top like that. Now, one of those tips that I've just done for years that I think is helpful is whenever I'm unwinding my string, I will leave it to where the hole where the string goes through is pointed the direction of the neck, because that's the way that we're going to want it whenever we restring it. So it's nice just to stop there. Once you get the tension off of it, you can go ahead, pop out the bridge pin if you want. Sometimes they come out just by hand, sometimes they don't. And that's another great little tool that's on the end of these D'Addario string winder, string clips, is a little groove tool that we can gently place underneath our bridge pins. This one's a little stubborn, but you do just want to be careful. Well, if you have some issues with that, I'll show you what to do. Hey, this is real life, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this string. Get it out of the way, and let's go ahead and take another one off, because I want to show you what you can do with a stubborn bridge pin like that. So usually one full revolution of that tuning post will give you enough slack to be able to remove that. Okay, and then what you can do is you can reach underneath, and I want to make sure I'm just touching that bridge pin and not anything else, and I can gently push up with my fingers. Let me get my string winder tool. Press up as I assist it with that little tool to pop it out. Now here's another little trick that I've learned over time. Most of these bridge pins should be the same, but in a lot of bridge pin sets, they're not. I've had guitars where some of them have the groove in that bridge pin and some do not. And for whatever reason, just due to the boring through the bridge and the saddle, or the bridge, I'm sorry, sometimes the holes aren't exactly the same. And I found that bridge pins will fit in one hole better than others. So what I like to do is just keep up with my bridge pin slots and where they were. So I'll just set it aside and think, okay, my low E string is right there. I like to take these strings when I pull them out and just keep them straight on a surface there, because I'm going to dispose of them all at once. Let's see if I can get this one out without assistance, and I can. Set that bridge pin right there. Pull it out. All right. Then I'll just speed through the rest of these, and then I'll show you how I dispose of my strings. Daniel here just pointed out that this new model of the D'Addario string winder string clip has actually this tool on the end of this handle where you can slide it around the bridge pin and allows you to pull it out really handily. Used to, maybe it was with the Planet Waves model, that's what this was used for, and that's a lot more handy. So thanks, Daniel. So I have all of the strings removed, and what I like to do is take all 6 of the strings unwound and just wind them all together so that they will stay together just like this. And it just makes them easier to throw away. You don't have 6 individual strings that are trying to poke their way out of a trash can. And my sister actually one time made some really cool wall designs with a bunch of sets of strings, and there are even charities out there, I think, that accept used strings and do all kinds of crafts and fundraisers with them too. So you might just set those aside, or you can just throw them away all at once. Okay, now that we have all of our strings removed, this is a great chance to condition and clean our guitar because we have access to it. I can see here how much dirt and dust has accumulated on this brand new guitar just over the course of a couple months. A couple of products here that I'd like to point out. This is a D'Addario suede microfiber cloth that works great for this because it won't scratch anything. And then we've got some Dunlop formula number 65, which is just a safe, reliable polish and cleaner that works great for something like this. Even some warm water would do the job. You just don't want to use too much, of course. And I'm just going to take a moment to clean between these tuning posts where it's very difficult to clean whenever you have strings on it. There are conditioners made out there for your fretboard if you're starting to notice any kind of cracks or anything like that that you can use to help condition that more. This one's in great shape, so just a cleaning is all that I need. Usually underneath the strings right here is where I have some drool stains that I like to get rid of. Don't forget, that's a good point here, that a lot of these saddles are just drop-in saddles and can, well, they just about all are, but they can move on you a little bit. So just beware of that, not to lose it, and it will line back up under string tension here in a little bit. All right, looks pretty good. So now we can begin our string installation process and creating the wind around the tuning post. And everybody seems to have a little different way to do that. I have a way over time that I've just gravitated towards. The strings that we're going to use today are upon recommendation of my good friend and master guitar picker, Kenny Smith. He uses these EJ22s from D'Addario, and these are nickel wound, and they're actually more commonly used on electric guitar, but he likes to use them on his acoustic guitar. I've tried them before, and I most likely go back with these strings on every guitar change that I do. I go back and forth between the EJ17 mediums. The Santa Cruz parabolic tension strings are really, really good, and I love using those from time to time. And then these EJ22s. And being that this Gallagher is a model, a replica of Tony's Antique. They call it the RT, the Risotoni. I'm going to go with this nickel wound to kind of mimic the Monel strings that Tony liked to use. All right. Now, if you've never done this before, most of your string packages will have a color-coded guide somewhere, either on the cardboard or on the plastic shrink wrap, that explains which string is which. And of course, you can just tell by looking at the gauges and feeling of the gauges after a while. But seems like everybody, when they're learning how to change strings, will make the mistake of putting the wrong string on the wrong slot, wrong tuning post, and then they go to try to tune it up, and they go beyond the tension that's built for that particular string, and they pop it. So you just want to double check and make sure that you're putting the right string in the right slot. So my package says that this low E is going to be a brass colored. And that's what we have here, is the brass color. Now, there's several different ways to do this. And like I said, I'm going to show you the one that I've just grown accustomed to using. The first thing I'm going to do is insert string loop end down into the hole, and you can go ahead and run it down there however far you want. It doesn't have to go too terribly far. It just needs to clear the throat of this bridge pin hole. And then if you have a groove in your bridge pin, not all bridge pins do, but if you do, that's made for this string to fit into the channel of that bridge pin. And then the ball end there is going to lock with tension up against the bottom of this bridge pin. So if you don't have this string down in the guitar far enough and you try to shove this down, it's going to wedge like this in your bridge pin hole. That's not what you want. So you're going to have to stick it down, then go with your bridge pin. Conversely, if we fail to pull this string up until where it makes contact with the bridge pin, you're going to have string slippage for quite a while until it finally pops. You'll think something broke in your guitar because it'll go pop, pop, pop until it meets. And sometimes it will pull the bridge pin out with it. So you'll go to tune up your guitar and you'll notice that your bridge pin is sticking up. In that case, you can usually just press gently back down the bridge pin and it will seat on this string where you want it to be seated. But it's best just to get it seated right before you have a lot of tension on there. Sometimes what I'll do is gently put this down to this into the hole, and then I will use this tip to kind of press down the ball end of that string, and then I'll gently begin to pull with this hand as I press with this hand, and I can just tell over time when it feels like it's seated good. And you'll of course know whenever you start putting tension on it. Now I need to get my saddle slot back in there to where the groove cut on my saddle is lined up with my string, which it is. And then remember how I mentioned having this post lined up? That's just for the ease of threading these strings. So I'm going to go ahead and put it through. And I know that my guys at the store, one trick that they'll use, which is pretty handy, they'll go ahead and put all 6 strings in the bridge, and then they will bring them all out over here, and they'll take like a you could do it with this capo, but they'll just use a Kaiser clamp style capo and just clamp all 6 strings right here so that they have only this to work with. And then they'll just tighten one by one. That's pretty handy. I usually just do 1 string at a time. Okay, let's talk about the actual wind. We've taught how to do what's called the luthier's knot before. A lot of people are opposed to that. I think it's a pretty cool knot, although I don't typically do that. What I'm looking for is to, and this is true no matter what kind of wind or knot you use, you always want the string to wind to the inside. You want it to wind to the inside. That means on the posts that are on the bass side, your winding is going to go clockwise. So that it always winds to the inside. On your posts on the treble side, your winding is going to go counterclockwise. But you always want to see your string going to the inside. To the inside. Okay? Now, it's not a big deal if you get too much string down here on this tuning post. I mean, unless it's excessive and you have a lot of string slippage and it's just going to make it tougher to tune after a while. It is a big deal if you don't have enough string down here. So I found that the about perfect amount of string is if there's just enough slack where I can make that first wrap around the tuning post by myself, okay? Now, here's the deal. If you try and do that and you don't have enough, okay, then you'll kink your string and then that creates a weak spot in your string and it could likely break, okay? So one thing that you can do just to kind of, until you get a hang of it, you can pull your string kind of tight here. You can place your hand right back here at the end of the peg head and then move it back to here, and that would be plenty. In fact, that's going to be a little bit too much, okay? So you could even probably do half that much, but that's just, if you're really scared about not having enough, you can do that. I'm going to bring it back just a little bit, and then over time, I've just felt how much is needed for me to be able to get my first wrap. Okay, after I've wrapped it one time, we notice that my string is going to the inside. I'm going to press down with my index finger and hold it down. With my other fingers, I'm lifting up on the string just to create tension. Because what I want it to do is whenever I begin to wind this string, I want the winding to go beneath the tail of this string. So we have one wind over the top, that's what we just did. The rest of them are going to go beneath, and that's going to create kind of a locking mechanism on this tail to where we don't get any kind of slippage, okay? Another thing you might have saw me do was I like to take this string tail and bend it up to where it's just sticking up and it doesn't get in the way of my loop. Then I begin to wind, making sure that it doesn't go above. You see, that would be above. I'm going to go below. There, it just clicked into place. And then after I've got it started below, I'm actually going to put a little bit of up tension on it just to make sure there's no space in my winding. No big deal. It'll work itself out over time as well. All right, when I start getting it tight and I'm feeling it squeeze on my fingers, I can go ahead and make sure that it's in the slot of the nut. Also in the slot back here. Look at what the bridge pin has done. It's pulled up a little bit, hadn't it? Does that mean I have to start over? Absolutely not. I can probably easily press that back down. And that's just a result of that ball end of the string just getting seated underneath the bridge plate and not slipping past that plastic that we have there. And then I'm just going to start listening. You can have a tuner going if you want, up to about an E note. We'll have to retune after we get done. You can have a tuner sitting out if you want. But I can just hear it. You can too after a while. All right, so that, if you want to take a close look at that winding, Daniel, you see that you've got one loop over the top of this tail, and then we've got 1.5 down below it. And that's squeezing this tail in there and kind of locking it in place. Some people will want to have more of a knot on there that they say keeps it from slipping. I've never had it slip just like this. So that's just how I do it, and that's plenty of winding to have. Now, I go to clip this end. Of course, our D'Addario string clip works fine. I found that I get a better clip if I just go and buy some little wire nips from Lowe's or somewhere that's just a little sharper and get a little bit more cleaner cut. One thing you want to be careful of is if that string tail is right beside this newly strung string, I have gone in a hurry and grabbed both of them. Pow! And that's quite an explosion. So sometimes whenever it's really close like this, I'll go ahead and just back it off a little bit, make sure I can get a good clean cut, and I'm going to cut it as close to it as I can without cutting the other parts of the string. I don't need to leave any out, not if I've done a good job on my winding. We'll talk about stretching the strings here in a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter which order you go, but this A string is already unwound because it was wound up with the low E string. So I'm just going to repeat the process, and we'll just speed it up here as I go through both the A and the D string. Okay, we've strung up the bass 3 strings. I just want you to take notice that all of them are winding to the inside of the post, right? None of these strings are wound from the outside and then going in. I want you to also notice that we have a pretty uniform amount of wrap on each one of the strings. Now, the fatter that the string diameter is, the less wrap that we need around the post to get the correct amount of grip. As we go up, or I should say up in pitch, but smaller in string diameter, I like to put a little bit more wrap on the string just because it just grips a little better to have a little bit more. Also, I just want to mention earlier, I talked about pulling that string out with my finger at the end of the headstock. And then I said, well, that's not really a trick that I do. I've just heard it said that way. Daniel just reminded me that there's actually a trick to like pull it back to maybe the second or third fret. And then, if you need that, you may not need it. Again, if you just follow the rule that if you can get that first wrap around by just using your hand and there's not tons of slack left over and you're not having to really struggle with it, that's just a perfect amount. So let me point out, we're starting on the G string now. So we switched to the treble side. I'm always going down here and checking my bridge pins, making sure they hadn't come out any. I can gently press them in. Every once in a while, I have gone down here and saw a bridge pin poked out, and I go to press it down, and I'm not able to slide it past that ball end. I will have to take the tension off of the string until I can press that down, and then I bring the string back up to tension. So not a big deal. I've got it all in my slots there. Everything's looking good. I just want to point this one out because we're going to wind this string and the other two on the treble side the opposite direction. Okay, so just be careful because you'll probably make the mistake. I've made it even after changing the strings hundreds of times because I'm just in the habit of taking the string and going around clockwise like I did with these 3. And if we do that, I'll just show you. If we do that, then what happens to the string? It comes in on the outside. We don't want that. We want it coming to the inside. So same type of deal. I'm going to do just enough tension where I can get that string around with my finger. Boom. I'm pressing down with my index finger. I'm holding it up with these 3 fingers. I take my tail. I stick it up. And then it's kind of difficult doing it on this side of the guitar. I don't mind maybe standing it up a little taller. But the big thing is, sometimes I'll swing around on the other side, but for the sake of the video, keep it on this side. Big thing is that winding goes down beneath the initial winding. So we lock it in, and there we go. Oh, dude, what in the world? I know I didn't grab the wrong dang one. See, this is black. Black is the D string. Just for your education, I committed a mistake that many of you will make. Most all of you will make. And just to show you the mistake that you're going to make that us pros never make unless we just do it for demonstration purposes, which again, I repeat, and that is when you get the strings mixed up that you're putting in. I'm sitting here talking, making the video, and I reverse the D and the G strings. I've changed guitar strings I don't know how many times, and I haven't done this in a long, long time. It's just hilarious that it happened. And at first I was like, well, we'll just cut that. And I was like, no, I want to show it because this happens. And so what I've done is I put the D string in the G slot, the G string in the D slot. Okay, so we got 2 things here. We've got a broken D string, and then I've got a G string that's already cut to length on my D string. So guess what? I've essentially wasted 2 strings because since I've cut it down, I probably won't be able to put it back on the G side. So good thing I own a music store. And I've got another set of the Dario EJ22s here that I can rob the D and the G strings out of and then you save the rest for spares. I have to say it's embarrassing. I'm putting this out on the internet, but I just want to put it out there because it happens. It happens. And if you change strings enough, you're going to do a boneheaded thing like this. So here we go. We're back to the set of the D and G strings. And what I'm going to do is remove this G string from the D string slot and go back with the right one. So stand by. When you get to the B and the E strings, they're the unwound strings on most all sets. The winding helps you with the grip of the wraps. So I like to go a little bit more than what I'd normally do. So I've just gotten feel over time of how much slack do I need to get one wrap around, and I'll just do a little bit more. I'm getting your way here, Daniel, as I wind it. Again, just making sure it goes underneath. Of course, that first winding, but also the tail. And then you're just going to have more loops. I can't remember why I really do that, except that I've probably, over time, figured out that whenever I didn't put enough wraps on these unwound strings, that I end up having tuning issues. Or slips. Now I've just got one more to go. All right, not too much went wrong except just a little busted case of pride where the old instructor here made a stupid mistake, but I think it's more helpful for you to see how that happens, and it will help me not to do it the next time, I promise you that. A couple things to check just after I get done. They seem like obvious things, but they're good, and that is your bridge pin height. So if you notice that one's sticking up a lot more than the others, then you need to try to address that. You can gently press down on them. If it doesn't allow you to do that, you'll have to release your tension a little bit. They don't have to be all perfect because we are dealing with a piece of wood, and sometimes the bridge pins are a little different size, but you'll be able to tell if one is just abnormal and needs to be addressed. I'm looking here and it seems simple, but as you go, it's good to check that your strings are in the correct nut slots. I have in the past strung up instruments and then something's not feeling right and see that one of these strings is just not sitting in a nut slot. And so you don't want to chip your nut, so you can undo your, in fact, it looks like a little bit of a nut chip right there. I don't know why. Maybe it was just a piece of dirt. I think it's just a piece of something else. But so you can release your tension a little bit, slide it into the nut slot, and then return to tension. Let's talk about quote-unquote stretching your strings. People say they stretch the strings. Technically, I mean, there may be a little bit of stretch that the metal can endure, but there's not really any noticeable stretch that we're going to have. So when people talk about stretching the strings, what's really happening is seating the string against the bridge pin and also pulling the slack out of the winding around the tuning post. And the way that I like to do that is I will take each individual string and just kind of give it a shake. Just pull it up. You're not going to break anything. And I'll do that to each one. And another thing I like to do is just grab 3 or 4 strings at a time and just pull them together. Okay. You can even massage each string, and that's going to get most of your slack out, and any remaining slack that needs to be stretched out will happen within the first few minutes of playing. If your string continually goes flat over time, something was wrong either with your process and you had some excessive slack built into your windings, or there's something going on mechanically with your guitar. Maybe you have a string end that's malfunctioned. Maybe the ball has come out of the loop down there, and eventually that will just pull out. I've seen that happen before. I'm just trying to cover every possible thing that I've seen happen over the years. And then we're ready for a tune. She's ready to go. Now I will sound just like Tony Rice with a little bit of Kenny Smith thrown in there, and that's just fine with me. Hope that that's helped you. If you've got any questions about that, you can leave comments below in the forum thread. If there's something here that I've done that you do differently that you think could help me, I'm always open to learn. We're always learning. So hit me up with those tips, and I'll try to work it into my next string change.